Honourable members, I'm about to give the call to the Honourable Helen Morton. Again, this is a first speech of an honourable member, so therefore there will be no interjections. The Honourable Helen Morton.
Thank you, Mr President, for the opportunity to make my address in reply to the motion before the Chair. May I firstly congratulate you, Mr President, on your election to the Chair of the Council, and the Honourable George Cash for his re-election to Chair of Committees. I look forward to working with both of you over the next 4 years. I also thank the parliamentary staff and those people in the Department of Premier and Cabinet who've helped me through the orientation and induction to Parliament. I congratulate members who are like me in the House for the first time, and thank fellow members from both sides of the House for their welcome and support. As I stand before you today, as one of the Liberal members of the East Metropolitan Region, I have mixed feelings. I feel some trepidation about filling the shoes of such experienced, intelligent, articulate and well-loved parliamentarians as the Honourable Peter Foss and the Honourable Derek Tomlinson. I pay tribute to those two men who precede me here. They are held in the highest regard by people right across the East Metropolitan Region. I wish to record my respect for those men and their achievements in this place over the last 16 years. I recognise the privilege bestowed upon me by the WA division of the Liberal Party for its faith and trust in endorsing me to their number one position for the East Metropolitan Region. The party can be assured that this privilege will never be taken for granted. I have a strong and enduring connection to the communities throughout the East Metropolitan Region. I intend to repay their election of me to this position through dedication in seeking out opportunities to improve their health, happiness, prosperity and security. And I have a mixture of humility and pride that I'm a member of this time-honoured establishment, assisting in the robust governance of Western Australia. I'd like to acknowledge some wonderful people who've helped me become a member of this House. The Honourable Derek Tomlinson paid me the highest compliment in approaching me following his announcement of his retirement, asking me to consider becoming his successor. His wise counsel and mentoring on what it takes to become a parliamentarian has been unfailing over the last 3 years. Equally, since I became elected, the ongoing assistance and guidance of his electorate officer, Nola Smart, has ensured the smoothest of transitions to electorate duties. The Honourable John Day, member for Darling Range, has been assisting me in many roles over many years. I thank him for his example of integrity, dignity and humility as a politician. My immediate family, my husband Alan, our eldest son Aaron, his wife Michelle, and their 3 children, Jesmond, Jackson and Jordan, our daughter Alexandria, our youngest son Timothy, and his partner Misty have been and always will be the central point of my life. They have provided me with honest support, good humour, and a life full of wide-ranging experiences, free from the harmful feelings of guilt about wanting a career and a family. We belong to a large, close-knit family throughout WA and Queensland. I'm one of 7 siblings and Alan is one of 8. Our extended family is made up of close friendships and incredibly strong family ties. The closeness of our family has shown me what family traditions of integrity, love and loyalty can achieve. I respect these traditions and the value they add to my life, and I thank my parents for their example. I would like to thank my many friends and family members who've campaigned with me throughout the last couple of state and federal elections. I would not be standing here making this speech without their support. Appreciation is also extended to the willing, committed members of the Liberal Party in the Kalamunda branch, the Hasluck division, and in particular the President Heather Gilmore, the Hasluck Women's Division, State Women's Council, and particular Daphne Bogue, and the Canning and Pearce divisions of the Liberal Party of WA for their encouragement and ongoing support. My life experiences are my preparation to participate fully in this House and have helped to shape my values and beliefs. The first politician I ever heard of was Paul Hasluck when I was a primary school student at Franklin River, where I was raised also on a War Service land settlement farm. I was assigned a project on Papua New Guinea, and although my father had served there during the war almost 20 years previously, my mother suggested writing to the then Federal Minister for Territories, Paul Hasluck. I was overwhelmed by his reply and his subsequent photographs and project material. I received top marks for that project and would like to think I've learned how to respond to the smallest of my constituents from that event. Little did I think I would ever have the honour of representing the East Metropolitan Region, which takes in the federal seat of Hasluck, held by my good friend Stuart Henry, and where my family and I have lived for the past 35 years. Whilst I boarded to attend secondary school in Albany, my parents moved from Franklin to a sheep station northwest of Meekatharra and eventually retired from the land as mobile rangers with CALM for 8 years before compulsory retirement at age 65. Still very fit, my parents went back onto a sheep station out at Sandstone, which after 7 years my husband and I took over and still operate. My parents again retired into voluntary work at Yanship. Love of the environment and community service has been instilled in everything we do. We are a sport-loving family, with our 3 generations involved in tennis, netball, basketball, football, athletics, horse racing, you name it. On Mother's Day this year, I was watching our grandson's under-8 football match. As I walked out at quarter time, I was embraced by the coach, our 30-year-old son, and then by the umpire, our 24-year-old son. No Mother's Day present could ever match the pleasure of seeing my sons continuing our tradition of service to the community. I trained as an occupational therapist and worked throughout Western Australia and interstate. The best clinical application of my skills was within the field of mental health rehabilitation. Despite increased spending on mental health, strengthened community treatment and support services, reduced isolation of mental health from mainstream health systems, and expansion of psychiatric disability support services, mental health still represents a major public health challenge in WA, and this is still an area I remain strongly committed to. With the establishment of a private contractual occupational therapy service to nursing homes, hostels and daycare centres throughout the metropolitan area, I moved into health management. This eventually led to 13 years as a senior executive within the Government Health Service, initially as the Regional Director for Health in the Wheat Belt, then the Midwest and Gascoyne regions. I represented WA in developing the inaugural National Multi-Purpose Service Strategy for Country Health and Aged Care Services, and remain supportive of multi-purpose roles across government services, especially in country areas. The important role services in the East region play in sustaining country services were clearly demonstrated through those years. Working as the Director of the South Metropolitan Health Authority, and then as the General Manager of Finance and Resources within the Department of Health, I became appalled with the obstacles and waste of resources created by bureaucratic inflexibility between local, state and federal responsibilities for health. As the General Manager of Armidale Health Service, this was again apparent when, in cooperation with local GPs, a low-cost antenatal service was established in the hospital grounds. The only other option for these mums to access free service required them to travel for all of their antenatal care and to have their babies to King Edward Memorial Hospital. Everybody agreed that a free service at Armidale was in the best interests of the mothers, their babies and their families, but the Commonwealth officers were not supportive because of a fear of cost shifting between levels of government. They preferred to see these mums, mostly on low incomes, go to King Edward Memorial Hospital in Subiaco rather than have the GPs involved charge Medicare for services at Armidale. It took 12 months to get a special approval from the Federal Minister for Health for the GPs to charge their services to Medicare in this shared state-Commonwealth arrangement. Common sense must prevail in finding new approaches to local and federal and state responsibilities in health. And whilst I'm on obstetrics, at one stage the government was prepared to let obstetrics close down at Armidale. It was too hard to find specialist obstetricians and guaranteed anaesthetic cover for the declining service there. I didn't accept the closure of the service at Armidale and became somewhat notorious for flying in obstetricians from South Australia for 4 days every 3 weeks to give the sole obstetric specialist at Armidale a break until enough specialists were recruited. This government gave me a hard time in the press for paying anaesthetists to ensure the hospital was covered 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, a practice which has proven necessary in the eastern suburbs and continues today nearly 3 years after I've left the hospital. That hospital now delivers over 1,000 babies a year. Is it just easier to let obstetric services close down at Kalamunda Hospital rather than develop satisfactory protocols for a GP and midwife obstetric service? I believe it is sheer laziness to adopt a close-it-down solution and hide behind centralist clinicians who argue clinical or resource appropriateness. Recent research has shown that in Australian hospitals delivering between 100 and 500 births per year, volume is not associated with adverse outcomes for low-risk births. There are serious implications in WA for communities if volume is accepted as a determinant for clinical or resource appropriateness in obstetrics. All hospitals north of Perth, with the exception of Geraldton, deliver fewer babies a year than Kalamunda. Only 4 out of 57 country hospitals delivered more babies annually than Kalamunda Hospital over the last couple of years. There are successful alternatives. It takes a bit more work, but there are successful alternatives to close it down, which I intend to pursue on behalf of the families around Kalamunda, the GPs and the midwives. My interest in health reform is well known. I've been involved in the State and Commonwealth Health Agreement negotiations. I've managed the negotiations and accountability for health budget of the state, 25% of the total state budget. I've managed the state's Health Capital Works program, and I've managed the state's health litigation and legislation program, and it was not easy. Health expenditure in WA is approximately $6 billion, growing at an average rate of about 8% annually. This cannot and need not continue. Health 2020, the discussion paper written in 1998 and the subsequent plan for health in the metropolitan area written in 2000 had most of the answers. There are more answers in the Reid report of March 2004. Whichever report you read, the solution partly lies in the expansion of services in peripheral hospitals such as Swan and Armidale. These types of hospitals should undertake the majority of the work in the metropolitan health system and the number of more expensive tertiary beds in tertiary hospitals reduced. Each time a tertiary bed is used for a non-tertiary case, it wastes the state approximately $380 per bed per day. And more than 80% of cases in tertiary hospitals are non-tertiary cases. This wastes the state upward of $100 million a year. And already this government wants to increase the tertiary beds at the new hospital south of the river to nearly double that recommended in the Reid report. I fully support the development of a tertiary hospital at Murdoch. The north-south imbalance in population-based funding in health services is absolutely staggering. But the unnecessary centralisation of services in the south to reach 1,000 tertiary beds will merely replicate the waste in current tertiary hospitals and come at the expense of fully developing and maintaining a cheaper option for providing exactly the same clinical services at Armidale Kelmscott Memorial Hospital and Rockingham Kwinana Hospital. The lack of vision shown by this government in not releasing Galliers as a private hospital on the Armidale site is stunning. The failure of the hospital to honour the lease agreement with the private operator and the subsequent penalty, a settlement out of court of over $15 million of taxpayers' funds, is a scandal. This $15 million makes up part of the $97 million for the health sector in the Treasurer's Advance Authorisation Bill 2005 that was debated in this House last night. What a waste. These wasted taxpayers' dollars would have paid for hundreds and hundreds of additional cases waiting for elective surgery. The implication of the government's action will be the gradual decline of specialist services at Armidale as specialists move away from the site to seek an alternative mixture of public and privately run hospitals at which to base their rooms. 3 public general hospitals stand out in terms of their ability to attract the mix of providers, specialists, to provide the services most needed by their local communities, rather than those patients having to go to alternative hospitals. They are Joondalup, Peel and Armidale. Why? Because they have co-located private hospitals on site. Co-locating a private hospital on a public hospital site enhances the recruitment of specialists necessary to work in the public hospital, and this is especially so in the East Metropolitan region. Having worked for the past 12 months as the Chief Executive Officer of a home and community care service, I am certain we can do more to help older people continue living independently and safe in their own homes. We cannot afford to wait for the inevitable crisis brought about by the enormous population growth in the number of people over the age of 85. Currently, only 20% of people over the age of 65 ever access an aged care service, and less than 10% of those people need nursing home or hostel care. The other 90% receive home and community-based care, mostly provided by untrained or non-clinical staff. The huge majority of elderly people continue to live at home with no or minimal support. Broader home-based support services can go a long way to meeting the future needs for this worldwide phenomenon and keep aged people out of acute and long-term institutional care. Apart from basic help to live at home, elderly people most want personal safety and security. The home and community care program needs to be broadened to include programs to promote personal safety and security. Having worked as a senior executive in the public sector for 13 years, I can assure you the majority of public servants are dedicated and hardworking. They take seriously the ongoing requirements to improve service quality, contain costs, and be accountable. But their ability to produce sustained excellent performance is thwarted by a sector which mostly pays lip service to employee performance management. I'm grateful to the Leader of the Opposition for the opportunity of being spokesperson for public sector management. In that role, I will seek improvement across the sector in public sector standards of human resource management, and especially in how agencies evaluate and manage employee performance. I applaud the initiative of the 4 public sector watchdogs, the Commissioner of Public Sector Standards, Auditor General, Ombudsman and the Corruption and Crime Commissioner in seeking to work closer together to streamline their efforts and those of public sector agencies in ensuring integrity within the public sector. We know we have a cultural problem in the public sector when more than 50% of employees who responded to a survey sent out by the Commissioner of Public Sector Standards in 2004 felt that they would not be protected from victimisation, harassment or some other form of retribution if they reported wrongdoing. This sort of punitive culture permeates from the top, and I will be doing everything possible to hold ministers and CEOs accountable for changing it. The other portfolio area that I represent in opposition is that of women's interests. The Women's Report Card put out by the Office of Women's Interests in March 2004 provides some very interesting baseline data. Information about women in business, education and as elected positions in government, where women remain significantly underrepresented in elected positions across all tiers of government. Still, less than 1/3 of all members of government boards are women. The electors of the East Metropolitan Region have set a new standard, electing 4 women to the council out of 5 members. The report card goes on to show that WA has the largest gender pay gap of any state and territory in Australia. How less than 1/3 of all legislative positions in WA are held by women. And WA has the lowest proportion of sworn and unsworn women police officers of all states and territories. That women carers will meet the bulk of the demand for increased caring across most age groups. A lack of alternative care options for the disabled, aged and children impact greatly on women's capacity to participate fully in society. How 7% of adult women have actually experienced violence in the home, workplace or community, and how the fear of that most women have about violence restricts their freedom, and how important family, friends and social networks are for women as they age, and how they have less financial security than men. And finally, how improved health outcomes for women will be better achieved through accessible, culturally appropriate, community and home-based care which can better deal with physical, mental and social well-being. And still people ask why we need policies and portfolios specific to women's interests. I thank the Leader of the Opposition for the opportunity to pursue better outcomes for women in WA. In conclusion, Mr Speaker, I again pledge my commitment to serve the people of the East Metropolitan Region to the best of my ability without fear or favour, and as charged by His Excellency the Governor, to use my imagination and creativity to contribute to Western Australia's health, happiness, security and optimism. Thank you.